Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us this afternoon here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. Mike Koribanics, criminal defense attorney, is with me in studio this afternoon to break down all of the cases we are following. So here the jury is obviously watching surveillance video from the parking lot where the victim was shot and killed that night. We just saw a white car pull out of the parking lot. That was Kendra's car, and it seems there's no audio on this video, but we are waiting to see what happens next. Mike, let me bring you in here because obviously this is a garage. Usually garages do have cameras all over. In this case, we're seeing this angle, but do you think that the defendant, or I should say the hitman and the getaway driver, did not consider that, didn't think about, oh, we might be caught on camera?
Well, it's almost unbelievable to me because almost everything is caught on camera. It's very difficult to have a case now where the state doesn't give you some sort of video surveillance, some sort of CCTV. And I think sometimes when you are sort of the gang who can't shoot straight, that you don't really think of those things and those things aren't plotted out. Sometimes people think just by putting a hoodie over your head, that's going to carry the day. I think it's a big risk anytime you're in a public area to try to commit a crime, especially something like this, because I don't know how you don't know it's not going to be videotaped.
But the point is, right, it was Christopher Love and Crystal Cortez in that vehicle, not Brenda Delgado, and this is the trial of Brenda Delgado. Is this video still important for the jury to see?
Well, it's absolutely, because it shows that they were acting on her instructions. I mean, it's still going to be very difficult for the defense to get around the fact that these two people picked this victim who has a connection to who this prosecution's claiming is the mastermind. And that's a difficult thing to get around.
Let's go back in live into court where the detective's testimony continues. We've been listening to Detective Eric Barnes from the Dallas Police Department. He spoke about how he interviewed Brenda Delgado's cousin. We know that's whose vehicle was used in this shooting and in the getaway. And then he said that he also spoke with Brenda. She came in. Mike Koribanics with me here in studio this afternoon, criminal defense attorney. You said that the defense may have an opening with this witness.
Well, the defense, I can't understand why this judge is allowing this detective to allow the detective to testify as to what the cousin said. That's hearsay. And I feel badly for the defense attorney because he keeps objecting, and that always is not a good thing to do in front of a jury because they think you're hiding something. I think his best tactic right now would be to ask the judge to be heard outside the presence of the jury to make his objection, because it doesn't seem the judge is grasping what he's doing here. What it could do to their benefit, though, is I assume at some point in time the cousin is going to testify. So now they have somebody who may contradict his story. So you'll have two versions of his story, which is always helpful for the defense to poke holes in.
And we just heard him reference the point that when he, had a warrant for her arrest, he couldn't find her. She had left the country. We know she was on the FBI's most wanted list, the only woman for some time. The fact that she fled, I mean, does that speak to her guilt? Or could the defense just say she was scared or she just wanted to go visit family?
Well, defense could say what they want, but what's always very problematic in these situations is there is a jury charge under the law of consciousness of guilt that you could infer from the defendant's actions, but you got to show that she had knowledge of the crime when she fled. So that'll be really a big hurdle for them to come over, a very big hurdle.
So essentially a witness who heard the shots, saw the car speeding away, definitely a key witness in this case and in the cases of the other defendants who are already tried in this case. Right, Mike?
Yeah, these are always very difficult witnesses because they really have nothing to do with anything. They don't know anybody involved. And, I can only think of his testimony when I've heard bits of his testimony is when he said it sounded like a dog, like an animal. That's how much pain she was in. I think that little bit of a line carries a lot with the jury because they really humanizes it, and it shows the suffering this victim went through.
Right. I mean, essentially, he's a man on the street. Like you said, he didn't know anyone. This is not law enforcement. He's saying, you know, what he observed, and I agree that it sort of does bring it down to that human level. Let's go live into court now because the jury is watching a video of Brenda Delgado being interviewed by the detective. Wow, lots to talk about of this interrogation video. I mean, Mike, first of all, let's talk about the defendant's demeanor. I mean, it was a while before the detective even read her the Miranda rights, and they're chatting like old friends there.
It was very peculiar when we were off camera. We looked at each other when he started reading the Miranda rights because you almost were like, why weren't those read much earlier? It seems she's taken this detective because he hasn't really gotten to anything yet, and you don't know how long you're going to have her being this freely speaking, and I'm surprised because he's supposed to be such an experienced detective that he allowed her to really take the lead in this statement so far because she hasn't confessed to anything.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we can't see her face that closely. I mean, her body language, she certainly seems very relaxed. And I was curious, I said to you, you know, while we were watching this, to see her face when he said, oh, you used to date Ricardo Panigua. And she was like, yeah, you know, curious because we've heard so many other witnesses talk about how obsessed she was with this ex, what might come across her face, you know, when his name was mentioned. But, you know, maybe she expected this and sort of rehearsed it and is being a good actress.
So far, she's being a very good actress because it was funny. She didn't even flinch when he mentioned her name, and you thought that would be like a hot spot where it would just get her going and be like a weakness and maybe have her get emotional, especially when you hear about the other witnesses. And maybe the defense could use that to their advantage when they're summing up in the case, but there's a lot of road to travel yet.
I think what's interesting about this is we're not just hearing and seeing this interrogation video. We're basically getting a narrative from Detective Eric Barnes about what he was thinking and seeing at those moments during the interview. I know you've certainly found a lot of it to be unusual, right, Mike?
I find a lot of this very objectionable. I mean, he says one time when he's during the interview that she says something, he says, that's a bold-faced lie. He should be instructed by the judge, and the judge really seems to have no control of this trial. Is whatever the state wants she's letting in, it's the jury's determination to find out who's lying or not the detective, and not at this stage. And I can't believe there's not an objection. And at this point, it's almost a mistrial motion because he's really saying whether or not this is a good witness, bad witness, this confession's credible or not. That's a jury's determination, not a witness's.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Is it important for him, though, to talk through, you know, some of the details, right? Like the Chili's receipt. She was quick to say, oh, yeah, I was eating a chili. See, here's the receipt, right? And it was pristine. It was at the top of her wallet. Those are the sort of details that he should be sharing, right?
To a point. I mean, to a point. The jury sees this video. They don't need him to narrate it. It speaks for himself. The jury could show, I would be shocked if they don't have that receipt into evidence and kept it. It doesn't look like he did, which I think is going to be a problem later on, because if they thought it was so unusual, why didn't they keep it?
Right.
That's a great point for the defense to make.
Let's listen back in live, see what else was said during this interview. Let's mention something, Mike, that the jury saw right when we went to break, which was a photo of Kendra Hatcher with the defendant's ex on her cell phone that they found on her cell phone. This is after she told the detective, I knew her from Facebook, but that was really it. And then here she has this photo of the happy couple.
Well, that's really damaging in my opinion, because it's sort of, we said earlier, that's why you've got to really hold off till the juries make the final decision after all the evidence. But at first she seemed very cool with it and seemed like the other witnesses were contradicting. But who carries a picture of your ex and their new girlfriend in their cell phone? And it's not a good look for her, especially, you know, during this interrogation so soon after the murders.
Interesting observations, again, objectionable perhaps, from the detective that we heard, where he said every time, you know, her body language started to change, started to lean forward. Every time I asked her a tougher question, you know, she was wearing a deep V-neck and she tried to appear as though she was leaning forward to push her breasts up.
I thought
interesting observation, and perhaps an inappropriate one.
I think that was objectionable. I still can't believe that was objected to, and I think it was very unprofessional, and I think it was it's going to hurt this detective's credibility, because the jury is left open to determine what her body language says. I mean, if you want a body language expert, then they should have hired one who could explain what these certain motions are. I thought that her leaning forward was just her closing up and not being open,
and that's
not trying to seduce the detective.
Right. We're going to go in and listen back now, but that's what we're seeing now. Her kind of holding her arms, you know, looking a bit more uncomfortable. Let's listen. All right, the camera's getting set up there. Obviously, the detective is referring to screenshots from Brenda Delgado's phone now of text messages. Let's see if we can zoom in and see what those text messages say. But certainly more interesting stuff came out there as the detective continued to ask her about her ex and his girlfriend Kendra, and she basically, at one point she said when he presented her with the photo, she'd never seen the woman, which is bizarre because she has the photo on her phone, and earlier she said something about knowing her on Facebook. He also says at this point, you know, her posture is changing a little bit. You know, she appears to be getting more caught up in her answers. And Mike, your observation was, so here she's starting to sound like a teenager, lots of likes, and oh, well, yeah, you know.
It seemed when she started out, she was very articulate. She knew the words she was using, as you said earlier, almost rehearsed. Now when he's he's wearing her down. I mean, becomes a war of attrition, and she's using like, and to me that always signifies someone who doesn't know what they want to say and is searching for words, which you can also imply that they're searching for a story to cover it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear she's sort of starting to go off the rails a little bit with her story, whatever that story may have been. Can we go back now and see what they're showing now? Actually, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, much more live from Texas. A lot of interesting stuff we're hearing there. You heard Brenda Delgado say, oh, no, she didn't borrow the car from Jose Ortiz. Crystal Cortez borrowed the car. Crystal Cortez was driving that Jeep, which the detective said he later found out to be a lie. What we're also hearing, it's a little hard to hear, it's obviously happening off camera, is there are a lot of objections from the defense team to the line of questioning here. A lot of them are getting overruled, although one of them, the most recent one, I think, was sustained. If you're the defense attorney, would you be doing the same thing?
I think I'd be a little more animated than this defense attorney's being, because I really think the prosecution is really getting away with a lot. I think this is very damaging, and I think the prosecution may reap what they sow on an appeal here, because I really don't think this witness is qualified to do anything but elicit what the facts were he got and what the things that were said. When you start getting into, do you think she was lying? That's the jury's question. When you start talking about body language, that's a body language expert, not a detective. And I really think a lot of this has been very prejudicial to the defendant. And I think, you know, trials are very simple. Lawyers make arguments, witnesses give facts. And that's all this witness should be doing. He's doing more than giving facts, he's editorializing. And I think it's quite improper.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it certainly is unusual here, and obviously it seems there's a lot more to go in this tape, perhaps. Whatever he may have thought wasn't enough to hold her, because we know she fled to Mexico the next day, and then it was months till they found her. Anyway, we're going to take another quick break, but when we come back, much more live from this Texas courtroom as the Brenda Delgado trial continues. And remember, we're still on verdict watch in 2 other cases. We'll be right back.